So you're sitting on your couch when everything in your room comes to life and declares loudly, "Let's send this one up." You start to panic a bit despite knowing that it's okay because, well, this is weird. But your panic quickly changes to absolute astonishment when the roof of your living room is ripped right off the top of your house, and what is there glaring at you now is a massive creature that is so beyond words and description that you are completely convinced that this is really happening. This being would be absolutely terrifying if it wasn't for its sweet telepathic accent encouraging you to remain calm because, as it says, like music, we have a lot of work to do. This thing sends down beams of lit up yet somehow organic tubes of material that pulls you out of this entire world. Your skin produces a black liquid from its pores and collects into two stones that are swatted off by this being's many helpers. He says to you, before you come up here, you will have to lose those, but you have no idea what it is that you just shed. You are now disembodied and in a place that cannot be put into human words, but if you had to utter a description, you might say UFO. The walls are moving with powerful shapes and designs and are also just as alive as everything else. Next, you can't tell if this is a window or a screen, but you are now viewing earthly life from outside of the hard drive that it's programmed on. It could show you anything, but instead it shows you a vision of yourself laying in the snow building the bottom portion of a greenhouse. The being can feel and hear everything going on within you watching this scene, and it says, "What you are doing here is good, but why are you doing it frantically? You have no choice but to be honest and admit things to this creature that you would never say to other people, saying, I'm afraid that if I don't outwork all others, I will suffer financially and I am deathly afraid of letting my family down." The being sees your sincerity and willingness to cooperate and rips a giant hole in this new reality that leads you into yet another one. And I mean, what the f***? It leaves you there so it can go do more work for other humans when out of the complete white surrounding, or I should say lack thereof, three beings emerge that are even more ineffable than the first. The first one was startling, but these new guys are impossible to even look at. In fact, they have to shape themselves down to something like hands for you to even comprehend. You feel like an insect floating in front of creator gods of a proportion that your personal mind could have never even fathomed. They start moving blocks that light up in differing ways as they are moved and aligned, and urgently ask you, "Do you understand? Do you understand?" Well, no. I don't. Telepathically is not even the right word, but you can feel them say, "That's okay, you will." But it needs to be sooner than later. We are all depending on your species. When you arrive gently back into your body, one might say that you have woken up now that your eyes are open again. But you know that by coming back, it is more like going back to sleep. Because the world you just experienced had spatial dimensions that you can no longer imagine. Distance and time did not exist over there. Those limitations occur only in this thin skin of reality, and you don't know why. But you see a clock and you realize it has only been 10 minutes. You write down everything that you can about this experience, but pencil on paper is possibly the most futile way of capturing a concept of a world without concepts. A world that surrounds us all of the time, but we are blind to. A world brought to you courtesy of DMT. Chemists, neurologists, and all other scientific trades which concern it across the board have one thing in common concerning DMT. They have no idea what it is, its function, and why it does what it does. You've seen a million videos concerning the mysteries of DMT, and I don't want to repeat those, but there are a couple things that we have to cover before jumping into our hypothesis. Descartes was the first philosopher to call the pineal gland the seat of the soul. He was certainly onto something, but didn't quite have the scientific terminology yet. And the same goes for ancient mythology and religion, but we will tie back into that later. Scientific studies on rats have shown that the pineal gland is responsible for melatonin, serotonin, and dimethyltryptamine, the last of which, as mentioned above, is a complete mystery to mankind. It has been found in cerebral spinal fluid, and scientists have actually cloned the human common gene that makes the enzymes that are the catalyst in DMT synthesis within the body. It has also been shown in rats that dimethyltryptamine is released from the pineal gland into the bloodstream upon the occasion of death. This has caused skeptics to believe that near-death experiences, or so-called life flashing before one's eyes, to be random neurons firing off due to hallucinations. However, if you caught the last couple of videos, we all know better than that. After all, just like we have to ask ourselves what the placebo effect is instead of using it as an umbrella explanation for mind over matter, we have to ask ourselves what is a hallucination. There are indeed certain things that material science cannot measure and weigh. Outside of the scientific community, however, DMT has been described by many as a gateway between the physical world and the spiritual worlds. This notion is only argued by people who have not dipped their feet in those waters, because surely if you have partaken, this notion is completely clear. In fact, it seems to take you to a reality that is more real than real. Imagine waking up from a dream that was very vivid, but now that you're awake in this reality, you can look at your hands and say, okay, that was a dream, and now this is reality. But then think of doing that a second time. That is, out of this reality and into a clearer one. That is kind of what we mean when we say more real than real. We know that this chemical, DMT, is extremely important as it exists in almost every plant and animal. So every living thing, basically. This is why we really can't call it a drug. The cubensis mushroom yields a drug called psilocybin, and the cactus peyote yields a drug called mescaline. THC comes from cannabis, and so on. Basically, each plant has a specific active ingredient. This is clearly not the case with DMT, as you are currently holding it within your lungs, liver, pineal gland, and cerebrospinal fluid right now. So are all of the plants in your house. There's some dudes watching this right now like, I don't have any plants in my house. But the one plant that has the highest concentration of DMT, the Acacia strain, is mentioned in mythology and religions worldwide since time recorded. The Ark of the Covenant was made of acacia wood. Moses spoke to the acacia bush that was burning. Now, the Sufis seem to argue that the bush of Moses was actually Syrian rue. This is absolutely fascinating to me. And some of you might already know where I'm going with this, but when you combine the DMT from acacia and the amino acid inhibitors of Syrian rue, you get digestible DMT. Kind of like ayahuasca. So the irony there is fun. Two differing spiritual sects that claim the bush was this or that, but if they stopped arguing and came together, blam, portal to the divine, bitches. But yeah, acacia is everywhere, even in Masonic rites. For example, the allegorical murdered body of Hiram Abiff, who built Solomon's temple, which would have to be its own video, was said to be resurrected from his resting place beneath an acacia sprig. In the Egyptian Masonic rites, the acacia is referred to as being the first matter, and through alchemical transmutation can produce a stone, if you kind of see where I'm pointing at. Then there are the countless ancient alchemical manuscripts that mention acacia and its divine essence. This list goes on, but I digress, as I just wanted to bring your attention to how important this plant is in all world religions and sects. But keep this in mind for later. But we have to remember that religion, well, I should say spirituality, is not a one-size-fits-all, as it is personal to you, just as we have discussed with symbology. An organism exists because it gathers information from its environment and adapts to it, thus moving up and forward in its adaptation process. Behind this process is a code of reality that is hidden from our five senses. Certain obvious and self-evident things like these are often ignored by science, as they cannot study them in a material way. And of course, in the case of DMT, we have heavy corruption, being that it has become the most illegal substance on Earth for absolutely no reason, or for a reason that we'll talk about. So yeah, there's just no funding to study it anymore. But as the brain evolves, so does the world that it generates. Hallucinogens, especially DMT, modify the information that the organism takes in and creates, showing them a reality that is seemingly alien. But these realities are not less real than our normal, limited biological waking state. In fact, they might be a simple case of picking up more information than we normally could. This makes it very interesting when we consider the prior fact that DMT seems to release as the body dies. Under the influence of DMT, it is unignorable that it seems to be some kind of near-death experience, and even kind of feels like dying. And then we encounter creatures that are sometimes just as surprised that we can see them as we are to see them. The usage of DMT in ancient cultures is obvious by now, but we have to remember that these cultures would personify these encounters to help communicate the message that came to them to the masses. An example we are familiar with would be the concept of mathematics, language, and wisdom being personified by an archetype such as Thoth. But what about the personification that we see in figures in all world religions that greet us post-death? Figures like Saint Peter in Christianity. He stands at the gate between this world and heaven to meet up with you and go through a sort of book of life to see how you did. Anubis in Egyptian culture is quick to weigh your heart against the feather, and this again seems to be a way to grade your readiness to level up. There are many other cultures that have figures just like these two for their own particular post-death philosophies and theologies, but these are the most well-known to us, so let's run with them for now. The parallels between the personification of these two figures is obvious. It seems to be kind of a post-death vibe check. I mean, it's almost obviously clear that they are describing the same figure or being. This to me is beyond coincidence. Now, I realize that what Peter is doing seems to be a form of judgment, unlike Anubis and his form of vibe check. But we have to remember that the corruption of the Orthodox Church has oftentimes pushed this concept of judgment into the scriptures in order to help themselves in controlling the masses. We have to remember that the church used to make the laws, and our modern scriptures reflect that. But what does this have to do with DMT? Well, obviously, death is the key element here between the two subjects, but let's talk about that so-called vibe check. Anyone who has done DMT will tell you that the beings that they encounter seem to know them personally and have a grasp of what they have done with their life, thus making them able to give advice that is sometimes mind-blowing and life-changing, while sometimes encounters with these entities are abrupt, as they will be greeted with a rejection saying that you're just not ready yet. There are also many cases where the person partaking in this sacred act is measured and studied by the ineffable beings to help these entities understand the person's level of vibration. So, speaking of these entities being ineffable, undescribable that is, if you were to try to teach this experience to masses of people, you would have to use a metaphor for these entities. This is where the ancient art of personification comes into play. Every culture always colors the ineffable parts of life with particular personalities of their own understanding. The Christians seem to gravitate towards wise old men with white beards. Thus we got Saint Peter. The Egyptians had what we call therianthropes, or hybrid creatures, in order to personify what can't be spoken. So the human formed man that is Saint Peter and the bird-headed figure that is Anubis is not literally what these beings look like. They are formless, they are spirit, they are ineffable. They can't be described, so we give out a little title and a category. Otherwise, our words fall on deaf ears. So there is no need for our ancient ancestors to have needed scientific jargon of chemical compounds like dimethyltryptamine, although it was obviously very important to them and every other culture. They would have had to personify or turn into allegory anything that we describe as scientific. Yet I have not been able to find what personification was used for DMT, despite knowing that it was a cornerstone of many cultures and theologies. But But wait a second. The ineffable beings, the near-death experience parallels, the life flashing before your eyes, the post-death vibe check, the studying of a person's life in order to level up, and most importantly, the concept of being at the gateway between the physical world and the above spiritual worlds, etc. Every single one of these things can describe both DMT and the figures of St. Peter and Anubis. What if we have been overlooking these conclusions and connections for centuries? What if St. Peter and Anubis and the other post-death entities are the personification of DMT? So, dimethyltryptamine is not just a modulator of reality, but literally seems to change your vibration in an obvious way. The way that you see the world after experiencing DMT is something that you just don't come back from. It is a complete game changer. Well, if done correctly. There seems to be a modulation of how we see the world, and that modulation is permanent, much like a near-death experience. The astonishment that comes with seeing a completely different reality than we are used to might wear off over time, but the disclosure of knowing that those worlds exist is something that we can never forget. This is quite literally Gnosis, as we have seen it with our own eyes, or I should say, with our inner eye. And there is just no scientific jargon that can explain it away for anyone who has had this experience. The phrase comes to mind, an oldie but a golden one: I know what I saw. Science has dismissed theology for as long as we have been alive. But once upon a time, science and religion used to be one. We are more than ever in desperate need of that reconnection of material science to the self-evident worlds of the mind, and the modulators that seem to create our reality that is projected from our very sentience. If you ask me, there can be no clearer evidence than that which comes with DMT, and that to me makes it obvious as to why it has become so illegal. DMT makes it absolutely known to the user that heaven exists, and it cannot be argued by anyone who has not partaken in this sacred act. Of course, the government would shut something like that down. Many of you are aware of the risks that come with being caught with DMT. You are literally better off to be caught with 100 pounds of crack and an arsenal of weaponry than this so-called spirit molecule, which is the most abundant of its kind in nature. The irony is staggering. The one thing that could connect our society to a higher purpose is now the most scheduled one and punishable molecule on Earth, and its abundance is unavoidable. This is literally like making consciousness illegal. One of the most ancient stories of mythology that we have covered on this channel is that shortly after creation, God would hide the secrets of the universe deep within the center of man's mind, or according to different translations, within their souls. That way, only those who are worthy can find it. We are reminded of how Descartes described the center of the mind being the pineal gland to be where the soul resides. That being said, it is no secret that DMT experiences do not have to be accessed through the usage of synthesized chemicals. We can, much like the shamans, access it directly from our own source. After all, it is an entheogen. Knowing this could help us answer the question, where do shamans actually travel when they go into the upper worlds and have communion with spirits? Who are these entities who give the shamanic healers advice on how to address particular problems and how to heal the sick of their ailments with no medical degree? What is the source of this otherworldly information, and how can this information bypass the five senses and enter our minds unobstructed? If I had time, I would go through the myriad list of proven supernatural powers of entheogens like DMT through ayahuasca and the studies of Rick Strassman, but you can read about those yourself. I actually don't have the main, if you want Rick Strassman's take on it, there's that. Basically, shamans the world over have proven their capabilities to bring information from the above down to the physical realm in order to conduct miracles. Even though these obvious findings are ignored by science, we have well documented them in independent studies. However, there are a million YouTube videos and books that cover all of that. And like I said before, I don't like to repeat the echo chamber that the internet has already become. But DMT has been a cornerstone of our human history, and it is by every definition miraculous. And there is that word right there, miracle. A word that is a key in the description of angels and the above worlds coming down into this one. Could it be that they would need a sort of chemical gateway in order to bypass the thick physical membrane that traps us within this black cube? I mean, we cannot enter a video game without a modulation of the coding. A scientist cannot study a bacteria in a petri dish without a modulation of the cell. And it seems that we cannot access these higher realms without the cornerstone being a part of our DNA, sort of unlocking it as if it were too also a code. So what if it works both ways? What if DMT, whether it be synthesized or already within us as an entheogen, is the key that these entities need to come in to modulate our reality for reasons that we can only speculate? In my recent conversation with Jade Lore of Compounding Infinity, she made it clear that alien beings would find this world to be quite a trip, or a hallucination, so to speak, as much as it would be the other way around, which whenever we go there, it's a completely alien world. So in that case, it seems as if there would be some kind of modulation to the code sent down to us using this tool that is already a key compound in our DNA, the essential building blocks of our essence and of our being. A lot of you are big fans of Terence McKenna, as am I. And he's known for introducing the stoned ape theory, in which human consciousness might have been catapulted into its current state by the usage of DMT and other hallucinogens. These ancient ancestors, being the same as us, surely would have encountered the same beings that we do today. And if you need proof of that, just take a look at the cave paintings or religious portraits all over the world. It is almost as if we were taught to take the path that we have due to a higher source through this chemical gateway, as opposed to directly from a so-called hallucinogen. By imitating the visions and sounds that were encountered during these altered states, a birthing process could very well have taken place that resulted in both art and language. And this goes without saying the obvious scientific fact that these entheogens are extremely neuroregenerative to the physical brain. So there would be a bit of a compounding or a snowball effect that would take place during these sessions of communion. But how does this chemical actually go about influencing our physiology? Let's break this down. What we call drugs attach to targeted cells called receptors. These are proteins that have been designed, so to speak, by nature to receive chemically modulated information from both external hallucinogens and internal entheogens. These receptors are targeted by the drug to provide a kind of vector for new information to transfer communication between adjacent synapses in the brain. This is done through electricity, and when the current reaches the end of a neuron, it releases pockets of neurotransmitters that were previously synthesized. Okay, that was a mouthful. But what that really means is that we are literally designed, created to receive these so-called drugs. Our bodies and minds are already pre-tuned to accept these messages. It is in our DNA to experience the divine. To ignore this is futile, and to make it illegal is just ignorant. Not ignorant, by the way, ignorant. Oh, cannabinoids, for example. You might know that there are receivers in our brains designed specifically to receive weed. So, I mean, there you have it. We are made for this, and then we rejected this essential part of ourselves for the profiteering of a small group of small-dicked men. An essential book, but kind of overlooked on this subject is Inner Paths to Outer Space. And pick this shit up if you want. I want to read my favorite paragraph from this solid unit here. Another unique feature of DMT is its active transport into the brain across the blood-brain barrier. Cells that are tightly glued together line the brain's blood vessels, preventing movement of most blood-borne chemicals into the brain's confines. Yet the brain sometimes expends energy to acquire some crucial molecules. I said modulators so many damn times that I said, crucial molecules via active transport across the blood-brain barrier. Examples of such molecules are glucose, the brain's fuel source, which is glucose, and certain amino acids that the brain is unable to synthesize on its own. DMT is one of these select compounds. Though why the brain expends energy to bring DMT into its confines remains a mystery. It is tempting to postulate, however, that just as glucose is necessary for the brain's function, in some mysterious way, so is DMT. Whoa. So dimethyltryptamine is weird, even outside of this kind of study and usage. The connections seem to get personal. For example, after I showed a drawing of mine on our previous video, the 9 and the primordial question, I read a comment that was from a woman in Norway that drew these exact same symbols and has begun to kind of decode them as they seem to be some kind of cosmic message that activates dormant DNA, according to this particular member of our community. And there might be more on that later, because after reading her comment, we spoke, and she was clearly smart as fuck, and even hesitant to drop this information anywhere else except for within our group here. But the reason that this video even exists today is because of a comment I read from a woman named Sarah. The comment was something along the lines of DMT is St. Peter and Anubis, and I am onto it, or something like that. I should have screenshot it when I saw it, but now I realize that I get comments like this all the time, but every once in a while, reading one will strike a chord within me. And even without all of this prior evidence that we just talked about above, it was like a little spark of truth ignited with me just reading that small sentence in the comment. I had no idea it would become a full-ass video like this one, but I clicked on her name and asked her what she meant. This led to another video call like the one in Norway where she laid it all out, and a few of the details in this video are actually hers. And when I went through the old library over there to kind of sort of debunk it, but also kind of investigate it, I absolutely couldn't debunk it. In fact, everything that she had thought up on her own completely checked out in every book that I had notes in, leading me to read up more on post-death entities and the science of DMT. I just never made the connection, and I don't think I ever would have. And connections like this one are kind of my thing. But well, frankly, looks like it is also kind of your thing too. And this is amazing to me. What I mean is that there's a million videos and books on DMT and a million videos and books on post-death happenings and so on. But these connections, whether they are right or wrong, only happen when the two come together. That is to say, when we come together. We mentioned earlier that the Christians say that the bush of Moses was an acacia, and the Sufi say that it was Syrian rue. And it makes me wonder if either group group ever realized that when the two of those come together, it solves a gigantic mystery. But as we have seen in the world, everybody likes to stay segregated to their own group and their personal belief systems instead of entertaining the ideas of others that would fill in the holes and gaps of their own philosophies. For whatever reason, this community that we have here today has evolved past that by leaps and bounds. In the comments, I am always reading people agreeing to disagree and sometimes combining information to come up with brand new philosophies like this one, all without the heinous arguing. I mean, we really dodged the internet bullet on this. Real truth emerges when we set our differences not aside, but instead together, and combining them to find out that we've all got the same thing kind of going. But when two adjacent philosophies come together, a clearer objective picture emerges. So damn, I mean, keep them coming. And let's keep this going.
Fountain of death, will we hydrate? truth within the divine.